One of the cafe customers humiliated a waitress in front of everyone. He laughed at her scars, not knowing who she really was. But the next morning, a line of Marines she once saved stood outside her door. Welcome to Heartland Stories. I'm Ethan Hale, and here I share true stories about honor, kindness, and quiet strength. Today, I'll tell you about a woman who was mocked for how she looked by people who never knew what she'd been through. About a woman who became the reason dozens of others made it home alive. This is a story about how memory and gratitude can bring people together, even decades later, to say we didn't forget. Ready to hear the story that Marines now pass down to each other? Then hit that like button and let's begin. Monday started like any other. At 5:30 a.m., Emma Jennings was already behind the counter at Red Oak Diner, tying her worn-out apron. It was a small roadside place where truckers, night shift workers, and retirees from around the county came for cheap coffee and quiet routines. Emma poured refills without missing a beat, served plates fast, and rarely made small talk. Folks knew she wasn't the type to complain or argue. But there was one thing you couldn't ignore: the scars. They ran from her right temple, curved down her neck, disappeared beneath her collar, then reappeared on her forearm. Most customers pretended not to see them. A few stole glances, then quickly looked away. But that morning, something was different. Around 7:10, three men walked in suits, expensive watches, loud voices, clearly passing through. They slid into a corner booth and immediately launched into talk about quarterly reports, golf scores, and business calls. Emma approached their table with menus, calm and steady as always. The biggest of the three looked up, and his expression shifted. His eyes narrowed. A sneer curled on his face. "You really think someone with a face like that should be serving customers?" he said, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. "That kitchen's more your place, where no one has to look at you." The room fell silent. Even the old radio behind the counter seemed to stop. One elderly man set down his spoon and turned away. The cook in the back froze mid-flip with the spatula. Emma didn't flinch. She gently laid the menus on the table, picked up the coffee pot, and started pouring. "I've served men like you before," she said evenly. "In places a hell of a lot harder than this." The man smirked. "Don't tell me you were military. With a face like that, you wouldn't have made it past the parking lot." His buddies laughed sharp and out of place. No one else in the diner joined in. Emma didn't blink. Her lips tightened just slightly. When she turned to walk away, her hands trembled, but her eyes stayed steady. She moved table to table, pouring coffee, clearing plates. And every gaze that met hers held no mockery, only silence. And something else, like everyone was waiting for what came next. Emma ducked behind the counter, pretending to tidy up napkins and silverware, but really she just needed to breathe. Her hand trembled slightly around the coffee pot. She knew that if she spoke now, her voice might crack. But break down? Not here. Not in front of them. Not ever. "You all right?" came a quiet voice beside her. It was Walt, the diner's owner. Mid-60s, kind eyes, always smelled like grilled onions and motor oil. He'd come up without a sound, like he always did when he knew someone was hurting. "I'm fine," Emma said, eyes fixed on the tray as she straightened the forks. "Just another day." "You don't have to serve them," Walt said gently, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "I'll take that table." "No need," she shook her head. "Let them look. Some folks are just scared of what they don't understand." He gave a nod and stepped back. That was Walt's strength, knowing when to stand close and when to give someone space. Emma moved to the next table, where an older man in a faded Marine Corps ball cap sat quietly. His windbreaker had seen a few winters, the emblem worn soft from time. He didn't speak, just slid his empty cup toward her. She refilled it. He looked up, met her eyes. "I served in Hugh," he said, barely above a whisper. "I know that look people give, and how quick they forget what scars really cost." Emma nodded once. No words needed. He left a $20 bill for a $2.50 coffee. On his way out, he gave her a quiet nod. She returned it. Nothing changed on the outside, but inside she felt it. Someone understood. Someone saw her. The scars on Emma Jennings' face and neck weren't from some car wreck or illness, like folks sometimes whispered. They were from another life, one she rarely spoke of. Not even Walt, after all the years working beside her, had ever asked. But under her bed, in a dented metal box, the truth waited quietly. A military dog tag, a few weathered photos from Iraq, a folded letter marked, "For bravery under fire." Emma had served in the United States Marine Corps, combat medic and logistics tech with Echo 5. Her role wasn't supposed to put her on the front lines. But in war, lines blur fast. In the spring of 2010, the forward base where she was stationed was hit hard. Mortars, IEDs. The whole place turned into a firestorm in minutes. When the first blast shook the compound, Emma was in the supply tent, doing inventory. She could have taken cover. Protocol said to do just that. But then she heard screaming. Outside, a transport truck was on fire. 2 Marines were still inside. One was pinned, his leg caught in twisted metal. The other was choking on smoke, trying to pull him out. Emma didn't hesitate. She climbed in through the shattered passenger window. Flames were licking toward the fuel line. She had less than a minute. She freed the trapped leg, dragged both men out. Seconds later, a second blast threw her into a concrete barrier. She doesn't remember much after that. Just blood, heat, the taste of dust, the sound of rotor blades, and someone yelling her name. She survived, but the burns left scars. So did the memories. The Purple Heart she earned sat at the bottom of that metal box. She never showed it off, never talked about what happened. She didn't care for the word hero. To Emma, it had just been a choice. The right one. After her discharge and medical retirement, a new kind of battle began for an ordinary life. Emma looked for work. Sometimes, interviews went well until she walked through the door. She saw the way eyes shifted from her resume to her face, and that was all it took. She could always tell the polite rejection was coming. When she walked into Red Oak Diner, Walt didn't ask about her scars, didn't ask about her past. He just looked at her and said, "Can you start tomorrow at 6? That was the beginning of her second kind of service, quiet, invisible, without a uniform. Coffee, clean tables, a tired smile that never quite left. And underneath it all, the memories of those who didn't come home. The hope that what she did on that base, on that day, still mattered. The next morning, just after 5, Emma arrived at work like she always did. The streets were still half asleep, wrapped in the soft haze of early dawn. She stepped out of her car and headed for the front door, then stopped. Across the street, people were standing in a line. At first, she thought they were just passers-by, but they weren't moving. Shoulder to shoulder, the line stretched down the block. Men and women, most in plain clothes, but with a posture you couldn't mistake. Marines. Some held small bundles wrapped in cloth. Others carried dog tags, little boxes, folded letters. No one spoke. Emma stood frozen at the door, key in hand. This wasn't a coincidence. This was for her. Last week, a few young guys had come in for breakfast. She'd noticed them right away, by their walk, their eyes, the way they carried themselves. Marines. One of them, quiet and straight-backed, left a note under his empty cup. "Thank you for our captain. He never stopped looking for you." Now she understood exactly what he meant. At 6 a.m., she flipped the closed sign to open. The first to step inside was a tall man in his 50s. He gave her a soft, almost awkward smile. "Black coffee, please," he said. Then, more quietly, "You don't remember me, do you, Jennings?" She studied his face. The silver hair, the solid build, the steady eyes. "Barlow. Lieutenant Barlow." "Captain now," he nodded. "Though I'm retired as of last month." She set a cup of coffee in front of him. "Good to see you, sir." He placed a small cloth bundle on the counter and unwrapped it. Inside was a worn metal insignia, Echo 5. "This was yours. You dropped it that day. It's been with me ever since. We've been looking for you for 7 years. No one knew where you went. One of the guys recognized you here last week. Said the scars gave it away. Sent a photo to the group." Emma stared at the medallion. Her mouth didn't move. "Everyone from that convoy. The ones who made it home," he said, nodding toward the door. "They're here. To say thank you." The bell above the door rang again. Another Marine walked in. Then another. Then a woman in a ball cap with a Corps patch. The line outside started to move, slowly, quietly. And each person, as they stepped through that diner door, paused at the counter and placed something in front of Emma. A token, a memory, a piece of the past they hadn't forgotten. The sun was just beginning to rise over the town. And inside Red Oak Diner, a morning unlike any other had begun. By 8 that morning, Red Oak Diner was nearly full, not with the usual clatter and hum of breakfast orders, but with a deep, steady silence, a kind of quiet that made every movement feel meaningful. The tables were filled with Marines, some in jeans and jackets, others with their families. You could tell who they were, not by their clothes, but by how they carried themselves. Upright, watchful, they had all served. They were all part of Emma's story. She moved between tables, pouring coffee, clearing plates, taking orders. But with each person who stepped up to the counter, she received more than just a thank you. The first brought a dog tag, worn, the letters faded. He was an older man with gray in his beard and steel in his eyes. He set it down on the counter. "You don't recognize me. I was the guy screaming, trapped in that seatbelt. You kicked the door open and dragged me out. I never said a word. Just screamed. But you didn't. You just pulled." Emma took the tag and closed her fingers around it. She nodded. That was enough. Later, a younger man came in, walking with a prosthetic. "I tried to crack a joke when you were putting the tourniquet on. Told you that with a medic like you, I might just flirt my way through it. You laughed. That's when I knew I was going to live." He handed her a note. Inside was a photo of a toddler, grinning in a red t-shirt. The caption said, "His middle name is Emmett. Thomas Emmett James. Thank you for that." By lunchtime, the tokens kept coming. Some brought medals. Others, letters from family members. A young woman in a Marine Corps cap laid down an envelope, 3 handwritten pages. "This is from my brother. He couldn't make it here, but he's alive because you wrapped his wounds under fire." He wrote, "She held my hand and told me I'd be okay. And somehow, I believed her." He says he remembers that more than the fight itself. Ellie, the kitchen assistant, brought out a box where Emma had started collecting everything. It filled quickly, unit coins, patches, folded notes, even a cross on a thin silver chain. By 3 o'clock, the line outside still hadn't let up. Walt stepped out of the kitchen. He took one look at the crowd, walked over, and flipped the closed for lunch sign around. "Today's not about schedules," he said quietly. "Today's about what's right." Locals started stopping in just to see what was happening. Some whispered questions. One man stepped outside, pulled out his phone, and began recording. Within hours, the video of Emma standing behind the counter, accepting one dog tag after another, was making its way through veteran groups and small-town feeds. The caption was simple. "She saved them. Now they're here to give her name back." At one point, Emma looked up and realized the diner had no empty seats. But no one was in a rush to leave. People sipped their coffee, spoke in soft voices. Some reached across the table to place a hand on a friend's shoulder. And many just looked at her, not with pity, but with a kind of respect she hadn't seen in any job interview, in any polite, "We'll be in touch." To the outside world, it might have looked like a reunion. But to Emma, it was something else entirely. It was the day her memory stopped being a burden she carried alone. The day every scar and shadow in her eyes found its mirror in the faces of those who remembered, who understood, who lived because she had stepped into the fire. Around noon, the phone behind the counter rang. Walt picked it up, listened for a few seconds, then looked over at Emma. "It's for you," he said quietly, holding out the receiver. "Said it's important." Emma wiped her hands on her apron and took the phone. "This is Emma Jennings. It's me." The voice on the other end was uneasy, scratchy. "I was at the diner yesterday, with some friends. I wanted to apologize. I didn't know who you were. Didn't know what you'd been through." Emma stayed silent for a few seconds. She remembered the voice. She remembered the face. She remembered the laughter at his table. "You don't owe me an explanation," she said calmly. "You made a choice yesterday, and you're making a different one today. That's yours to carry. I wanted you to know. I'm sorry," he said, quieter now. "I realize how wrong I was." "We all judge by what we see on the outside," Emma replied. "What matters is what we do once we know better." There was a pause on the other end. Then, just one word. "Thank you." And the line went dead. Emma placed the receiver back on the hook, turned, and returned to the counter. Another visitor was waiting, this one holding a velvet box with a military medal inside. She didn't need approval from those who looked no further than the surface. She knew who she was, and that was enough. The VFW Hall in Shepherd's Creek was a modest brick building with a faded sign and an old American flag that whispered in the evening breeze. Normally, it hosted quiet veterans meetings, the occasional potluck, or a memorial service. But tonight, there wasn't an empty seat in the place. People stood along the walls, sat in the aisles, filled every fold-out chair. Volunteers were stationed at the door, not to keep people out, but to preserve the silence, the reverence of what was about to happen. The ceremony had been organized by Captain Barlow and the former Marines of Echo 5. They had discovered that an official commendation, approved over a decade ago, had never been delivered. Emma had slipped off the radar not long after her discharge. No fanfare, no news cameras. Just veterans, their families, and those who knew what the moment meant. They chose to hold the event here, in the town where Emma lived, where she worked, where she still showed up each morning, doing her job with quiet grace. Backstage, Emma stood alone. A simple black dress. Her hair down. Her scars uncovered for the first time in years. No effort to hide. No need to run. "You ready?" Barlow asked softly as he approached from behind. He wore his dress blues, his chest lined with ribbons earned through years of service, through wounds, through leadership. "I don't think so," she said, exhaling. "But I'm going anyway." When she stepped onto the stage, the room fell into absolute stillness. People rose, not by cue, but by instinct. Some placed their hands over their hearts. Others simply bowed their heads. No applause. This wasn't a performance. This was something else. Captain Barlow stepped up to the mic, no script in hand. Just the truth. "We're here tonight to finish what never got finished." Corporal Emma Jennings showed courage that meets every standard for formal recognition in the Marine Corps. Her action saved 12 lives during the attack on FB Hudson. But she never received her medal. We searched for her. And then, we lost her. Some thought, maybe she hadn't made it. But she's here. And that means more than words. He handed her a framed certificate and a velvet box with a purple heart. This should have happened back then. But maybe now is exactly when we need it most. Emma held the box in both hands, staring down at it like it might vanish. Her fingers shook slightly. Then the tears came quiet, steady, slipping down her cheeks and across her scars. She didn't wipe them away. "I'm not a hero," she said, voice rough and real. "I just did what I had to do. Because I couldn't do anything else." In the front row, an older man in a weathered Marine Corps windbreaker rose to his feet. He tapped his dog tag once against the wooden armrest of his chair. The sound echoed. Then another followed. And another. Soon, the entire hall filled with the sharp, steady rhythm of dog tag striking wood. A Marine's honor, given only to one of their own. This wasn't a scene about glory. It was about pain, fear, silence, strength. All of it joined together in that moment. Emma stood beneath the sound, and for the first time, she felt it. This story wasn't hers alone anymore. It had been shared. It had been accepted. And finally, it had been understood. After the ceremony, no one rushed to leave. Some came up to say thank you. Others just looked her in the eye and gave a quiet nod. Emma stood off to the side, trying to catch her breath. The medal in her hand no longer felt heavy. It felt like it belonged, filling a space that had been empty for far too long. A young man, maybe early 30s, walked up to her. Loose shirt, steady posture. Beside him was his wife, slight, long blonde hair tucked behind her ears, a bundled baby in her arms. "You probably don't remember me," he said. "I was the one who blacked out after the second Humvee blew. You splinted my arm, even though you were bleeding yourself." Emma studied his face. Something about it felt familiar, maybe the eyes, maybe the voice. She didn't say anything, just listened. "This is our son," he said, gently rocking the baby. "We named him James Emmett Riley. Emmett for you, not for your medals. For the person who didn't walk away." His wife gave a soft smile. "We want him to grow up knowing that his name means kindness and courage, that it comes from someone who saved his dad's life." Emma looked at the baby. He was fast asleep, breathing evenly, peacefully, like life should be. She reached out and touched the edge of the blanket. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "We knew we had to," he replied. The name they'd given that child became something more than a gesture. It was a reminder that sometimes the greatest thing you can do in this life is show up, even when it hurts, even when you're afraid. Emma smiled, genuine, quiet. Not forced. Not for anyone else, In that moment, she felt something inside her begin to heal. A few days after the ceremony, life in Shepherd's Creek seemed to slip back into its usual rhythm. Cars hummed down the highway each morning. Older couples came into Red Oak Diner for their regular toast and coffee. Kids ran in for donuts before school. Emma was back behind the counter at 5:30 sharp, just like always. Same motions, same pace. Only now, something had shifted. On her first morning back, she walked in, flipped on the light and saw a cup sitting on the counter, right in her spot. Next to it was a small note. Black. No sugar. Just how you like it. She looked around. No one was there. She gave the faintest smile, took a sip. It was warm, fresh, made just right, exactly the way she made it for others. The next day, the cup was there again. No note this time. Just the quiet message. Someone remembered. Day after day, it kept happening. Emma never found out who was doing it. She never asked. Because deep down, she knew it was their way of saying, "We're with you." The customers who used to glance at her and look away now met her eyes. Some greeted her by name. Some just smiled. Younger Marines who stopped in for breakfast made sure to sit at her section. They'd eat, leave a few bills on the table, and walk out in silence. She was part of the routine again. But now, not as someone people ignored. Now, she was part of the story. Someone people looked at. Not with pity, but with respect. Emma hadn't changed her habits. She still poured the coffee, wiped down the tables, straightened the menus. But now, every step felt different. And every morning began with one quiet miracle. A hot cup of coffee left by someone who understood that even those who save others sometimes need saving too. About a month later, Captain Barlow came back to Red Oak Diner. As usual, he sat at the counter, ordered a black coffee, and placed his Echo 5 tag beside him, same routine. But this time, he brought something else. A thick envelope, official-looking, with the Marine Corps seal pressed in red and gold. "They want to include your story," he said, unfolding the papers carefully. "In the leadership course. For new recruits. To show that honor and service aren't just on the front lines. That real strength can come from places no one expects." Emma took the packet, read the title and the opening line. No fluff. No dramatics. Just facts. Combat medic. Sergeant. An example of personal courage under fire. She stood still for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll do it. But add something." She pulled a pen from her apron and flipped the paper over. In her own handwriting, she wrote, "Tell them scars aren't weakness. They're a map of where we've been. And if we've made it this far, then someone else can follow." Barlow nodded. "I'll make sure they get it." When he left, Emma tucked the envelope into her bag and went back to work. That day, she poured coffee with the same calm she always had. But inside, she knew. Her story wasn't just about pain and survival anymore. It had become something more. A lesson. One that would reach those just beginning their path. One morning, when Emma walked into Red Oak Diner, she found a small wooden box sitting on the counter. No note. No signature. Just a carefully carved plaque on the lid. "For Miss Jennings, from the young hearts of Shepherd's Creek." Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Written in crayon and pencil, on notebook paper, postcards, even torn pieces of construction paper. Some were crooked and full of misspellings. Others neat, with drawings, scars, hearts, a dog tag. "Thank you for not being afraid," one boy wrote. "You're very brave." "I want to be like you," said a girl with stars around her name. One letter, carefully folded and written in a shaky hand, read, "My dad has a scar too. He used to wear a hoodie, even in summer. After he saw the video about you, he went to the store with me in just a t-shirt. He said he's not ashamed anymore. Thank you." Emma pressed the letter to her chest and stood there for a long moment, silent. These weren't just the words of children. They were something more. A message from the future. A quiet confirmation that her story didn't just belong to the past. It was already changing the present. And maybe, just maybe, shaping what comes next. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time, for another story where quiet strength speaks louder than words.